Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. My name's Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today are Hayley Andrews, property investor, mentor and CEO of Your Freedom Empire. Welcome to you.
Thank you for having me.
You're becoming a regular contributor
I am.
now.
It's like my second home.
Good. Well, it's very good to see you and I'm sure our viewers are very pleased with the answers and contents you give. Thank you so much. Joining me via Zoom from France is Joanna Leggett, co-founder of Leggett Immobilier, French property experts. Welcome to you, Joanna.
Hi, Stephen. Great to be here again. Thank you.
So we'll get straight on with the questions. And Hayley, your first question is this, quite a long one. Your short-hold tenancies were introduced in the late 80s to encourage landlords to enter the market and increase the number of properties available to prospective tenants. The guaranteed tenancy length was 6 months. Because the financially restrictive terms in relation to mortgage deposits is to some extent restricting the ability of many to buy, do the panel think that a complete review of rental terms, including lengthy secure terms, should be undertaken by the government? In my view, the importance of the rental market has increased to a much higher level since the original rules were set and would therefore justify such a review. Well, I think the government has had a look at this, haven't they, Hayley? So yeah. Where are we with it now?
As you said, I think this has already been addressed. You've got the rental reform bill, which has been put on hold due to COVID, but is likely to come into effect this year. And ultimately, although the government hasn't set or listed what's actually happened within that, ultimately what they are doing is they are looking to abolish the Section 21, give tenants greater right of tenure, and also lifetime deposits and things like that. So among many other things. So I think this is already being issued or addressed, let's say. One of the things I would say is from a negative point of view, and I actually don't normally approach it as a negative point of view, but as a landlord, we are operating a business. And at the end of the day, if there are lots of restrictions around how we control that business, then it will actually have a detrimental effect, and lots of landlords will either leave the property industry and fewer will come in. So there is, there's a thin line here, and I think that it needs to be trodden very carefully. I work a lot with internationals, as you know, and the reasons they invest in the UK over other countries are the government's pro-tenant currently. Arguably, over the last 12 months, we may say that that's not the case, but historically, pro-tenant, leverage, lending capability, decent yields, and tax advantages. If we start messing around or moving too many of those pros, we will have less investment in the property industry as a result.
I think there's 2 or 3 things I'd like to just bring up that you've mentioned there. I mean, the first thing is, we have to say that the government during this COVID pandemic have been given amazing powers to interfere in our lives, haven't they?
Absolutely.
And I just wonder how easy it's going to be to wrest those powers back once COVID's finished. I'm not keen on government interference. If people have watched this programme for a long time, they'll know that I don't necessarily think that subsidising buying and helping buying is a taxpayer duty. I have a feeling that the market can actually take care of itself if it's allowed to. I do accept that there needs to be parameters and we need to have restrictions, and as you rightly say, we have a lot of overseas investment in the country, in our real estate market, simply because we are safe, we're honest, and our laws protect.
Yes.
Both sides, in actual fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do wonder here whether, I saw an article the other week where the government are suggesting on this ideal tenancy that tenants are just allowed the automatic right to have pets in their apartments. Well, a lot of apartments here, for instance, are almost glass boxes. They're not suitable for pets. But, especially younger tenants won't be thinking of that, and you'll have a lot of animal cruelty claims, things like that. So it's quite a complex and broad subject, and I'm not ever so sure that the government are the right people to be looking at it, really.
And whatever they do, they're never going to get it right. There's always going to, for every action, there's a reaction. And I think I've only ever been a tenant one time in my life, and that was actually recently. Moving into a new house, but hadn't completed in time and things like that. So it was supposed to be short, but I experienced what being a tenant was like, and I would recommend any landlord doing it actually, because it does make you think actually the other side as well, and give more thought to your tenants as a result. But there has to be that balance. If we go pro-tenant, then the reason we invest, it's a business. We're not just becoming landlords because we fancy being a landlord. We're in the industry to make money as any other business, and any other business that is out there, they have the control over what they do with their business. Putting too many restrictions on us as landlords will take that control away, and I think a lot of investors will invest elsewhere.
Well, the real key is the short-hold tenancies were designed so that the landlord could get their property back at a fixed point, and that the tenants knew exactly when that point would be.
Yeah.
I see during COVID we've increased the Section 21 notice periods, haven't we? I'm guessing that's probably going to stay. Do you think?
Well, they're looking at getting rid of the Section 21, but they'll have to
Altogether?
replace it with something else. So there needs to be clear path for landlords to gain possession. What they're looking to do is abolish no-fault evictions. So that's exactly what a Section 21 is. Unfortunately, a lot of landlords use Section 21s, or historically have used Section 21s, where there are other grounds that they could have used as well. So a Section 21 is, a clear path to be able to gain possession of your property. If they remove that, they will have to replace it with something else.
Yes. I mean, that sort of really destroys the purpose of an assured short-hold, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And just in overall terms, do you see the rental market availability tightening up because of all this then?
I do. I mean, if we go down the route and it's pro-tenant, less investors will invest in property to become landlords. We will lose international investment as well, because, as you said, they don't have that security or comfort to know that they can regain possession of that property. I think that as a result, that will give less properties to the market for rent, and then as a result of the lack of supply, the rent will go up. So it could be counterproductive in what they're doing.
I've been involved in a couple of the developments down here, and I mean, the foreign investment in those developments was around 70%.
It's quite high.
So if we discourage those people, there is going to be a huge shortage of properties available.
Absolutely. And I think that's why every single aspect or pro has to be looked at. Moving one or two needs to be replaced with something else. You've got to have that pro-investment attitude, otherwise we're going to lose a lot of investment here in the UK.
And do you think the government listens?
I hope that they do.
That was a very tactful answer.
It was, wasn't it? I'm very tactical answer as well, wasn't it? I hope that they do, yes.
Yeah, me too. I just once again come back to this business. We've had 10 or 11 housing ministers in the same amount of years. I just don't know how we formulate a solid policy going forward.
It's been very difficult.
Seems to be one of those jobs you either get on the way up or on the way down, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody stays for any length of time. Okay, Hayley, thank you very much for that. That was a pretty long and exhaustive question for you, wasn't it? But anyway, so we're going to go via Zoom now across the English Channel to Joanna in France. Your question is, could the panel explain tax regulations in France re a rental property in which I'm about to invest? If I am taxed on the rental income in France, at what rate would that be? And is that the end of the matter, or is there some impact on my UK tax liabilities too? In addition, if I choose to sell the French property in years to come, what is the position in relation to capital gains tax or the French equivalent?
Yes, if you buy a rental property in France and you are getting rental income in France, then you do have to pay tax on that. But with a double tax treaty, you don't have to pay it in the UK as well. So what would happen is you'd have to make a French declaration, a tax declaration for your taxes that you've, from the income that you've earned in France. Anything under 27,519 in a year is based at 20%. Anything over that is 30%. So that's what you'd be looking at. You'd probably be looking at 20% if you're earning up to 27,000 on your rental income. But you wouldn't have to pay anything when you get back in the UK because you've already paid it in France. With regards to capital gains tax, yes, of course. Exactly the same as the UK. If it's a second home, a holiday home, or it's not your main residence, then you would have to pay capital gains tax on that amount. It's only based on the profit, obviously. So if you don't make any profit, or you've spent a lot of money on the property and you have VAT receipts from registered artisans, you can claim all that back against your capital gains tax as well. And any tax that you've paid, for example, rentals or things like that. But the best thing to do, because obviously we're estate agents as opposed to financial advisors, is when you are looking anything to do with investment, is get yourself a financial advisor that's based in France. If you don't speak French, someone that speaks English, we can recommend a certain amount of people as well. That would be the best way. And then look into all the different options that you have. But to go back to the original question, yes, you would have to pay tax in France, but you don't have to pay it in the UK as well.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the programme. Join me again after break when we'll be asking more questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm joined by Hayley Andrews and via Zoom from France, Joanna Leggett. Welcome back. And Hayley, your second question is, what advice would the panel give to someone who lost their job through COVID and is now thinking of entering the property market as a complete novice? I've been considering either a buy-to-let portfolio or perhaps a let-to-let business. Any advice would be most welcome.
Oh, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
I might have something to say about that.
Yeah, there is no one answer to this question because it depends. So it depends on the amount of money they have available. Do they have income from elsewhere outside of their job? What are they looking to do with the portfolio they're looking to build? Is that subsidising their income? How are they living on a day-to-day basis if they don't have a job? The pot of money they have available, their lending capability and all things like that. So there is no, you would have to, everybody is different. So what I would say is, or for you to actually do and to answer the question is, first of all, have a look at the money you've got available. Answer that question, do you have income from elsewhere? Is the pot of money you have available actually subsidising your wages, and are you living off that money as well as using it as investment capital? Because of course that is going to change the money that you have available to get into the industry. Secondly, then what I would do is sit down with a finance broker, understand from a lending point of view what lending would be available to you if you don't have a job and no other income, because that will change. So you need to have a look at your individual lending capability as well. And then, and a financial advisor wouldn't hurt either. And then lastly, I would say, get yourself educated. You need to understand the industry that you are stepping into, and you need to make sure that you've got the right people and teams around you to move into this type of industry. Don't just pop onto Rightmove and buy a property and hope that it goes right. You need to fully understand the profession, because that's exactly what it is that you're moving into.
I think in some ways a financial stress test, which is carried out by a good broker or financial advisor, is not a bad thing. I mean, when I was sort of growing up and first started in business, my manager used to say to me, if I say no, don't argue with me, think why.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely.
And so a stress test can help you with that.
Yeah.
Where do you suggest people get their education from, Hayley? I know your company, for instance, will do educational courses and mentoring and help, but I see on the internet certainly some of these websites that are, I would say, a little suspect, you know, and because I think when somebody says, look, you can make millions by building your own portfolio without putting a penny in yourself, and one thing and I'm thinking, oh,
Yeah.
can you now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's all sorts that you can do. There's a lot of free information out there online. There's a lot of credible training companies that can teach you the fundamentals, and I think you just need to check those people out. You can do it on your own, or you can do it through a training company and a mentor that will get you there quicker, or you can have a go yourself and move forward that way. There's no right or wrong answer. It very much depends on you, your skill set as well. So if if you've got a good business head on you, you understand numbers and you understand due diligence, etc., then it may be easier for you than someone that perhaps struggles with numbers and doesn't break down information well. So it was very much going to depend on the individual and on what approach you would take. Some people will have to outsource an awful lot. That's going to cost money. Do you have the money? And you have to plan this out. You know, what is my plan? Is it a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan? Or am I looking to, replace a £3,000 job income in 12 months' time? In which case, the route you take to how you answer those questions is going to be very different.
I think that's really good advice. I think you have to look at the end game, don't you?
Yeah,
You have to look
100%,
at the exit.
and then you work backwards.
Yeah. I like that. Just let's deal with the final part of that question, which refers to this let-to-let business.
Yeah, so rent-to-rent is another word for it. So there's pros and cons around rent-to-rent, and of course there's a lot of bad press around rent-to-rent for people that are doing it different, but you are able to do rent-to-rent. It's a great strategy. It's a cash flowing strategy. You don't own, so you are managing and controlling an asset. If you are brand new coming into rent-to-rent and you have no business idea, or you have no idea of the industry, or you've got no credibility there, it's harder. But you can get educated, of course, and it is a strategy that you can come into with very little capital, which is why it's so popular. Because you can take on a rent, you can offer rent guarantee for a period of 5 years or more if you wanted to, and you will manage and control that asset with a view of making it positive cash flow. So that's...
Look, I can see the attraction of it. It will
there's a right way of doing it,
yes,
and there's an absolute wrong way of doing it as well.
I think if I was a property owner and I was being pitched for putting my property into somebody else's hands, I'd want to know about their financial circumstances. I'd
Absolutely.
want to know about their track record. I think that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that is the key. So obviously, being professional about it all. Now, I do rent-to-rent. I have done rent-to-rent. I started doing rent-to-rent probably about 10 years ago, so before it was so popular. So it's a strategy that works, and it's a great income strategy. You don't own that asset. You hand it back at the end of the term or renegotiate that term. So it's a great strategy to get cash flow, but you've got to then make sure that you're obviously still building your own portfolio in the background.
Yes.
Because cash flow is great, but at the end of that term you lose that cash flow. So,
and that your management strategy is pretty bulletproof, I suppose.
Mine.
Well, anybody's.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have to be registered with the correct bodies. You have to have, qualifications around that as well. You have to register with the ICO, anti-money laundering, all things like that. So there's a right way of doing it, and there's a wrong way of doing it. Going to Rightmove, picking up a property that's on the market to rent, and then pretending to the landlord that you're going to be living there yourself is not the way of doing it. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people will do it.
Okay, Hayley, thank you very much for that. That's some good complex answer. I mean, but you know, there is a lot to think about with all these things. I'm afraid property is not a sort of one-way road to making money without any skill or business experience.
You absolutely need to know what you're doing. If you are looking at rent to rent or let to let, or any other strategy, you need to swat up on that, because if you do it wrong, you could be legally liable. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Hayley, thank you. Joanna, your second question is this. Have the residency requirements to settle in France changed significantly now that Brexit has been fully implemented? Are the regulations much tighter now and more expensive, or are the French authorities still keen to encourage foreign ownership?
Okay, well, obviously they have changed because now we're not in the European Union. So we don't have the freedom of travel that we used to have before Brexit, which is obviously unfortunate. As far as Macron's concerned, yes, he's always encouraging foreign investment. And to be honest, it has changed. You need to, if you've got a holiday home, you can only now stay for 3 months, whereas before you could stay for under 183 days. And then have to leave. Now you can only stay for 3 months, and then you have to leave for 3 months and then come back for 3 months. So the time period has completely changed. If you want to stay longer than that, you do actually have to apply for visas. Now we've seen initially it was all a little bit, messy. We had COVID, we had Brexit, paperwork was getting delayed, visa applications were being delayed because people weren't working in offices. But it's all starting to sort itself out now. And if you actually own a holiday home in France, and if you're not renting it, it's an actual your own property, then they are issuing visas for longer stay if you want to get a longer stay. The thing I would say is that you have to go to the French embassy to apply for this before you come to France. You can't do it whilst you're in France. So if you're looking at your holiday home and say you want to stay for just under 6 months, under the 183 days, then you need to go to the French embassy to apply for one. They're not expensive. I think they're from 99 euros or something like that. So it's not a huge expense. If you go over 183 days, then you're actually a fiscal resident in France, which is a completely different ballgame. Then you're a tax resident as such. So you'd have to declare your taxes in France. And you'd also have to apply for carte de séjour, which is your permission to be able to stay in France. You would have to prove your income, that you can support yourself, and I think it's something around €1,000 a month, perhaps a tiny little bit less, but that's what you would need to be able to show, that you have that income so that you're not going to be reliant on the state if you come to live in France. You can show that in many ways. It could be a pension coming in. We have a lot of early retirees here from the forces, for example, that can show that they still have that income, your proof of address, things like that. But it's been quite simple. I mean, we've had a lot of Brits moved over just before the Brexit deadline so that they were in the system. But you've got to remember, we've got so many other nationalities outside of the EU already living here. We've got Americans, Australians, South Africans, etc., that we sell to all the time and have been for the last 22 years. And you just have to go through the visa process like anybody else would have to. Unfortunately, we didn't have to do that before, but we do now. But it's really, really straightforward, and there's so much help on hand on all the government websites that have in English and French. But the best place to start would be, if you need a visa or you need a long-term stay, would be to go to the embassy in the UK if you're based in the UK.
Well, there we are. That's all we have time for in today's show. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you too to Hayley Andrews for your super answers today. Thank you so much.
Difficult questions today.
Difficult ones, yeah. Well, that's what we're here for.
Yes.
Okay, and Joanna Leggett, thank you for joining us via Zoom, and we look forward to seeing you next time you're back in the country. So thanks for watching. See you next time. Join me then.